He's got Voice of Resurgence, Locks on Smiter, Restoration Angel, Thragtusk, all that good stuff. But most importantly for Mr. Shrout is he's coming up a Pro Tour top 8.
Absolutely. Andrew Tenjum, there on the left, is a face you might recognize. He finished second place at the Madison Open in 2012 with Delver of Secrets, of course.
Yes.
One of those players, one of the blue-white players. But he's had a lot of success with various types of strategies, including a finish of his own with Prime Speaker Bant, top 16ing the Indianapolis Open, the most recent Indianapolis Open,
sure.
I should say. Sure. So he will know what Andrew's doing. He, however, this time around is on Naya Aggro.
Yes, and when Andrew Tenjum was able to top 8, I don't think he had access to Voice of Resurgence.
Absolutely.
Like Mr. Shrout does, so you're going to see that on turn 2, and an attack with Avacyn's Pilgrim. Now, Tenjum's deck list is you're going to see Mizium Mortars take care of that Pilgrim. He's got 4 Pilgrims of his own. He has 4 Boros Reckoners, 2 copies of Experiment 1, 3 Flinthoof Boar, 4 Smiters, 3 Restoration Angels, 4 Hellkites, 4 Voice of Resurgence, 4 Domri, 2 Mizium Mortars, 2 Celestia Charm. This deck list is very, very close to what Willie Edel lost with in the finals of Grand Prix Gadawara.
Yep.
So
Andrew has an additional Experiment 1, I believe, to Willie Edel's list, and there was actually a lot of debate in various articles the week after that. If that's a weird thing to have, one Experiment 1. I mean, the name 1 is in the name and all, but that's a weird number. And then people realized, well, you really that's a fine number. You want it to be your 5th 1 drop. You don't ever want to draw 1. It is going to be the biggest Experiment 1 in the business in this deck with Thundermaw Hellkites, Restoration Angels, and Loxodon Smiters. But I think that having 2 is a slightly more aggressive list. He also has these Selesnya Charms, as opposed to, I believe, Willie had another burn spell. Is that correct?
Well, we'll take a look. We'll bring Willie's deck list up here right now.
Very similar list to that deck. He's playing Naya Aggro, which is not Naya Blitz. Naya Blitz is a Burning Tree Emissary-based deck. Andrew's deck is has a Voice of Resurgence in it, which you can't really be running out of the other side. Meanwhile, Andrew Shrout has made Garruk Relentless, a card that's been making waves this weekend in various archetypes, including his Prime Speaker Bant list. If you're interested, we have a deck tech with Andrew Shrout's Prime Speaker list going up later today, if it isn't up already, of course.
You see him come in and does Tenjum with the Smiter, double block there by Shrout at the ready to be able to double block, but you see Restoration Angel says, I don't think that's a very good idea, so that means that Garruk Relentless is still out there. The only problem here, the Garruk Relentless is not very good on this particular board. It can't pump out a 2/2, but it can't fight anything profitably right now, so as a result, it's rather weak in its current state.
Yeah, 4 toughness is a very large butt. Andrew, however, has larger animals in his deck, and he also has more Planeswalkers.
So Jace Architect of Thought. So that's going to go up. The Garruk's going to put out another Wolf, and basically what Shrout's doing is making it very difficult for Tenjum to be able to kill either of the Planeswalkers that are on the table.
Yep. Make more chump blockers, make everything Cumberstoned for the turn.
Oh, I see what you did there.
Yes.
I see. So the only difference you're actually going to find here from the starting 36 between Tenjum's and Willie Edel's list is that Tenjum has cut a Celestia Charm and, has cut a Celestia Charm and added a Loxodon Smiter. Edel had 3 Smiters where Tenjum has 4, and we have Tenjum with 2 Celestia Charms where Edel had 3. Other than that, those are the only changes that you're going to find. Willie did have 2 Experiment 1s, as does Tenjum. Everything else is straight up the same.
From Grand Prix Guadalajara, this
correct.
is?
When we do go over the sideboard, we'll see if Tenjum has made any changes there. But you've got an exact same mana base, and you've got basically an identical main deck. And it worked for Willie Edel, so why can't it work for Tenjum, basically?
Well, the meta has changed slightly in the time period in between.
Sure.
And it has now included Jace Architect of Thought, because that card is much better in this metagame than it was in that metagame. Today we have things like Lingering Souls, not to mention Verol's, Cartel Aristocrat, things with much smaller power than we did at a time when Jace was much weaker. Things like Thundermaw Hellkite were much more common.
Yeah, so I mean, this is a matchup where Jace isn't particularly at its best, again, because they're such big animals, but it's doing what it can. It's basically being used for card drawing mode right now, instead of its Cumberstone effect, where I agree with you, Jace's Cumberstone effect is actually quite good against your junk aristocrats, maybe your normal aristocrats, token-laden decks, but instead you see it here not being terribly impressive, but you're going to see Garruk going to shoot down that Avacyn's Pilgrim, going to flip into Garruk the Veil Cursed, and so now Shrout is kind of threatening to maybe sacrifice a guy and search for a better creature.
Yes, and he does have 2 singleton bullets in his deck to be able to go get for specific situations. He does have 1 Angel of Serenity. He also has 1 Aetherling to be able to take over the end game, whereas Andrew, not really, well, that's a good top deck. I was going to say that he's sort of running low on cards. I believe he top decked, is that a Thragtusk or is that an Experiment one?
I believe it was an Experiment one, so not the best.
Not nearly as good of a top deck.
So we'll see how Tenjum wants to attack here. Because of the Jace's Cumberstone effect, he can't actually take down Garruk the Veil Cursed. It'll have 2 power. It can take down the Garruk, which will solve at least one problem here for Tenjum. But again, he's not out of the woods yet. He's still got a long way to go. And we know here in the booth, as you guys do at home, that Shrout actually does have a copy of Prime Speaker Zagana in his hand. So if he's ever able to hit that 6th mana, this game's going to be wildly different.
Yep. And I think Andrew correctly identifies that he needs to try to deal with those Planeswalkers as quickly as possible, getting the flyer in to kill the first one that's threatening to start making Death Touch Wolves, which will be able to trade with these large creatures, and sending the Boros Reckoner at the Jace. Now, the reason why he's sending just the Boros Reckoner at the Jace is because the Loxodon Smiter would just trade with the Loxodon Smiter, and that's not a favorable trade for him at this point, considering Andrew's board position of having many more wolves. And also, he could throw the Voice of Resurgence under the bus, which would become a 4/4 token, with what he's showing on the board, let alone what else he has in his hand.
All right, so you see Experiment 1, you see Boros Reckoner. It's going to level up the Experiment 1, and Tenjum's going to pass the turn back. Shrout's going to draw his card for the turn. See if he's going to plus Jace or if he's going to minus Jace. Is he going to go for the 6th land drop, or is he just going to keep using the Cumberstone effect? He's going to try to find the 6th land drop.
Yeah, he just drew the Aetherling, so he's going to try and find another land here, and he finds it.
So Temple Garden, Farseek, and Avacyn's Pilgrim are the cards that are revealed. We'll see how Tenjum decides to split these. You know, does Tenjum believe that Shrout needs a 6th land, or does he not really care and maybe splits the 6th land up with something else? It's going to be kind of interesting to see how he wants to go about doing this.
Yeah, well, and pretty much all of these are just +1 mana. So he has to decide which of these he cares the least about. Because he's not going to tap out for a 6 mana Aetherling this turn against a deck that has various ways to be able to deal with it, things like Bonfire of the Damned off the top or what have you. I guess that wouldn't deal with it with only 5 mana in play. There are many ways to deal with it, and he doesn't want to leave it out there naked, especially when you've got a Prime Speaker Zagana in your hand to be able to draw 4 cards thanks to Loxodon Smiter. So Andrew's going to draw 4 cards. He's going to get his 5th creature on the board, and it's going to be the largest thing on the battlefield, even larger than Andrew's pair of Smiters. Andrew's going to be able to untap here. See what he can try to pull out here, with Andrew having a significant card advantage and now even creature size advantage. Andrew's going to take his time. I've seen him play before.
Yeah, Tenjum is a pretty methodical player. He certainly does not play very quickly, but I mean that's perfectly fine. You want to make sure that you do get everything right within reason. So I mean he's definitely getting himself into a difficult board state right now. Again, he's got Reckoners. How does he want to use those? You know, he's got to deal with the Prime Speaker Zagana, which is a 5/5, which is the biggest ground creature on the table now. At any point, Shrout could attack and or block with Voice of Resurgence and put out that elemental token, which is going to be pretty large. So there's a lot of things he has to balance, and a pretty good start is Damirad.
Yep.
So that's going to reveal a Thundermaw Hellkite, and so now this game has changed dramatically.
Absolutely. Thundermaw Hellkite is going to throw the balance of power in Andrew's favor if he's able to get it on the board without Andrew having too many answers for it. Of course, he does have a couple answers to it in the form of Celestia Charm.
Yeah, but overall, it's actually pretty difficult for his deck to be able to handle flying creatures.
Yes.
You take a look at things, he doesn't have Supreme Verdicts in his main deck, he doesn't have Detention Spheres in his main deck like you often see with Prime Speaker banned deck lists. You saw the list that Paul Reitzel and Matt Sperling had worked on, which actually qualified Sperling for Pro Tour Dumbledore in a couple of months. They had 4 copies of Detention Sphere in the deck. You look at Shrout's deck list, he actually has Planeswalkers instead of Detention Spheres, 3 Garruk Relentless, 2 Jace Architect of Thought. So as a result, he doesn't have really very clean answers to a Thundermaw Hellkite actually resolving. He's going to have to do some chump blocking with Restoration Angel. He does have 1 Angel of Serenity that he can draw to and or tutor up if he's able to get another Garruk the Veil Cursed out on the table. But other than that, that card's actually pretty difficult for him to beat, as you see Shrout play a Breeding Pool tap to start his turn and figure out what he wants to do here.
I think I did just see one of the Celestia charms in Andrew's hand, so he does have an answer available to him. He is still facing down Domri and double Boros Reckoner, which is another problem card for Andrew's deck. Could that thing get going? He's going to start with this Thundermaw Hellkite. That's probably going to fight something, is what I would guess.
Yeah, I want to see how he's going to use Domri this turn. It's kind of interesting if he wants to try to keep ticking it up, because it's very difficult for Andrew to actually get into it. So as a result, you know, Domri creating the emblem is actually pretty realistic here. Or if he just wants to start fighting and let Boros Reckoner start to just kind of take it on the chest, and he can just move around some of the damage. That's what's going to be really interesting. But he's going to start with Thundermaw Hellkite and Restoration Angel coming into the red zone, and now it's Shrout's turn to kind of make an action.
Yeah, I think Andrew wants to see where he's at with this attack step, see what kind of tricks Andrew has up his sleeve. He doesn't know, obviously, what's in Andrew's deck. He's going to find out that Celestia Charm is one of the cards, and that's going to be able to deal with this dragon.
All right, so Celestia Charm does take care of Thundermaw Hellkite. And you see a Restoration Angel over there in Shrout's hand as well. So, you know, does he want to use that? Because he can just blink his Prime Speaker Zagana, get a bunch more cards, put Restoration Angel in front of Tenjum's Restoration Angel, they bounce off of each other, but then you're kind of opening yourself up to Domri's fighting ability, and then things get a little bit more messy. So,
absolutely.
I'm very interested to see if he's going to pull the trigger and get some more cards, because one thing here is that while he's drawing a bunch of cards off of the Prime Speaker Zagana, A, he can't attack with it, B, he can't really convert those cards and actually put them in play and have them break up what's going on here. So I'm very interested to see what Shrout, again, a player who just top 8'd a Pro Tour, what his game plan is going to be.
Yeah, and of the cards that he drew, lands were not among them.
Yeah.
So he is assuming a land is not on top of his library. He may miss a land drop next turn, something that his deck can't really afford to do, even his 7th land drop.
So Tenjum's going to play a Stomping Ground untapped. He did reveal an Avacyn's Pilgrim off of Domri. That's going to come into play. So he's used all of his mana for the turn. He's completely tapped out and has used Domri. Restoration Angel is going to blink Prime Speaker Zagana. So more cards coming for Shrout. Yep. We've got 5 coming to his hand here. Sphinx's Revelation among them. It'll be interesting to see yet again, now that he's got even more cards in his hand. We're looking at somewhere, we're in double digits at this point. Yep. He's going to take a draw step. How does he want to navigate not only this turn, but the future turns as well, to make sure that he can win this game?
Absolutely, and with only one more Celestia Charm in his deck, the number of ways he has to deal with that Domri raid are smaller now. He would have been able to give the Restoration Angel +2/+2 to be able to deal with it at 5, but Domri ultimates at 6, or ultimates at 7. It takes 2 more turns for the Domri to go ultimate. He's going to have to find a way to beat it before then. One of the answers is trying to just play out this Etherling and seeing where that takes him.
Yeah, I mean, he can make Etherling unblockable, be able to push through damage that way. He can start by his Restoration Angel that's in play right now, start to attack Domri, start to whittle away at it, but that's going to leave him open to some counterattacks. So he's got to balance a lot of different things, and also he's got a million cards in his hand, so that means he's got numerous decisions to make. Which cards matter, which cards don't matter, how much do I even care about Domri, which is obviously a little bit, because he's attacking into it and knocking it down to 2 counters.
At some point, these Boros Reckoners are going to come into play as well. He's only at 10 life.
Yep.
Those Boros Reckoners are at least 2 damage apiece if they get blocked.
Yep.
So Andrew is dwindling low. He needs to figure out how he wants to manage his resources here in order to stay alive and be able to turn the corner.
So he's going to start off with an Arbor Elf and a second Arbor Elf. Okay, so he's got some little idiots out there. He's got a Farseek, and you see a bunch of cards in his hand, and if he can actually get the cards out of his hand again is the question, as he's going to search for a land and then play 2 mana accelerants and Arbor Elf. So I predict, assuming that Shrout can make it to his next turn, that we're going to see a turn of, you know, possibly 3 spells next turn.
Absolutely.
Also could see a large Sphinx's Revelation.
Yeah. Etherling is another option, because those Boros Reckoners are representing a lot of damage, and being able to block and then blink it out is a very important thing to be able to do. Currently, he can block with an Arbor Elf to only take 1, but how much mana does he want versus how much damage does he want to take?
Yeah. So Tenjum is going to draw his card for the turn. He untaps his 6 lands. Of course, you see his board, his Lockdown Smiter, 2 copies of Boros Reckoner, a 3/3 Experiment 1, Avacyn's Pilgrim, and a Restoration Angel, but most importantly, that Domri, Planeswalker, still looming, still, you know, the thought of him fighting Boros Reckoner with another creature, the thought of him just revealing another Thundermaw Hellkite, a lot of things that Shrout doesn't have much control over. You know, he can't really lead Tenjum along into you know, kind of making a bad decision. I think it's up to Tenjum what he wants to do with this card and how devastating it can be. I don't think there's any room here for Shrout to try to trick Tenjum into making a bad play with Domri. So that's where things get a little bit more difficult.
Yeah, I think that Andrew has correctly assessed this game. He took out the two Planeswalkers not because they're card advantage engines, but because they were slowing his offense. And he realized that he needed to get rid of them as soon as he possibly could to be able to turn back onto the offensive side of the board. And that's squarely where he is. He is squarely in the offensive catbird seat here, and he is going to be able to deal Andrew a lot of damage on the turn that he's going to try to kill him. Is that this turn is the problem. Andrew's still going over his attack step.
So he's reaching here for Restoration Angel, and now he's kind of reaching towards these Boros Reckoners. You know, some people are very comfortable in cluttered game states like this, others are not. You know, this is a place where I actually try to get myself into, not on purpose, but I'm certainly not uncomfortable in a situation like this, where there's a lot of creature combat and picking your spots with what guys can come in and what guys can't. You know, some players this is very foreign territory for a lot of players. Other people, it's very common ground. I think a player that really excels at something like this is a Paul Reitzel, where he gets himself into situations like this with Affinity and other aggressive decks that he's always playing. Other players who typically play control decks, maybe a Patrick Chapin, might not be as happy being in a position like this. So we'll see if Tenjum is comfortable being in this position where, you know, he's got a lot of guys he has to balance, he's got a Domri he needs to balance, while also figuring out, all right, what can Shrout do as far as a counterattack is concerned that I need to worry about? So that's really the interesting thing that can happen here. And the play that you brought up of the Arbor Elves getting in front of the Boros Reckoners is what we actually see right now. So now there's going to be two Boros Reckoner triggers. Maybe they go back to Shrout's Dome. It looks like that's probably where they're headed, instead of maybe both of them taking out a Wolf token. So again, this is where things get really, really interesting.
I think that Tenjum realizes that he's not going to be able to get through on the ground. Those Boros Reckoners are going to be dealing damage by being blocked.
Yeah.
And so going towards Andrew's head is the best way to be able to do that.
So Shrout is going to blink at a Prime Circus Zagana yet again. So 5 cards deeper into his deck. So again, he has a million cards. He has, you know, pretty much, you would assume everything that he wants. Again, the question is, can he convert those cards into something? Because he's got the cards, and he's got a decent amount of mana. Kind of stinks that he had to let go of both of those Arbor Elves. But what can he do to convert his resources now? Because you see him leafing through his hand right now. I count 10, in between 10 to 12 cards in his hand. But 10 to 12 cards in there does not win you the game. You have to be able to get those cards out of your hand.
And still, those Boros Reckoners still loom large. He needs to put more 1-power creatures onto the board if he can. He needs to get that Etherling onto the board if he can, to be able to prevent just those Boros Reckoner triggers from dealing too much damage. Now, of course, he does, presumably, assuming he didn't discard it, and I can't imagine that he would, a Sphinx's Revelation in hand to be able to have a little bit of a buffer.
Yep. And so right now he has already played his land. He played a Hinterland Harbor for the turn. So, you know, if his game plan is to just Revelation for X, which it doesn't look like he is because he's already tapping mana, but X would be 7. So he could push himself up to 12, draw 7 more cards, get even deeper into his deck, which I'm not sure he needs to do.
Yeah.
But he has the option to do so. But you see him tapping some mana, so it looks like we might be taking a little trip to Thragtusk land, which is where we're going. So Shrout's going to move up to 10 life. And now it begs the question of, does he have maybe a Restoration Angel, but he's going to play another Jace Architect of Thought. And it looks like he's going to tick this up. So now the Cumberstone effect is going to come back into play. And now you have to figure out, does Shrout, all right, what kind of attacks can I make?
Yeah, at this point, I think that Shrout can start turning in his defense into offense. His Restoration Angels are 3/4s on the offense. His opponents are not.
Yes. You know, does he want to attack with 1? Does he want to attack with 2? Because attacking with 1 lets you push through 3 damage. Attacking with 2 lets you push through 6 damage. But if you only attack with 1, Shrout can actually block the other one, and his isn't going to die because, as you said, it's a 2-power Restoration Angel. So long as, of course, he does remember the Jace Architect of Thought trigger, which I would be very surprised if he forgot it.
Absolutely.
So we move back to Tenjum's turn. Tenjum, 2 cards in his hand, draws a mystery card. Not really sure what either card is in his hand. You know, right now, because he doesn't have Bonfire of the Damned to draw to, ideally, if you're Tenjum, the best card you can probably draw is Mizium Mortar, so you can overload it.
Yeah.
You know, that's a huge game right now. You know, Thunderwall Hellkite is probably the second best card that you can draw in this situation. And I certainly don't hate Selesnya Charm either. So we'll see what he has drawn for his turns, because you you see that he has at least one land in his hand. He's thumbing through the other card.
Yeah, Tenjum does not have access to a lot of the traditional late game top decks that Naya decks usually have, things like Thragtusk, things like Bonfire. The best possible that he could probably top deck there was Mizium Mortars, but that does not take out the 5/5 Prime Speaker Zagana, and it also leaves behind a Voice of Resurgence, and it also leaves behind a Beast Token. So still not an ideal situation for Andrew Tenjum. He was trying to be the aggro, it did not work out, and it seems as if this is turning a corner in Andrew Shrout's favor with both of the cards and the power on the board.
Yeah, it's kind of funny to look at how big Tenjum's creatures are in play and see Jace actually having a pretty large effect on this game.
Yep.
Where again, you would expect that card to be awesome against your Lingering Souls type deck, but you know, the Cumberstone effect is so good just pretty much at all times, which is kind of unique. You know, we've seen Haunter of Nightvale in this limited format, how good that card can be. We've seen Cumberstone in its limited format. Now you see Jace Architect of Thought going to work here, and it's changing the entire course of this game. Boros Reckoner going from 3 power to 2 power is huge. Restoration Angel going from 3 power to 2 power is huge. As you see, Shrout tapping mana now, so now Aetherling has resolved. And now this changes absolutely everything, because that's representing 8 points of damage, unblockable, provided that Shrout has the necessary mana to make all those activations work, which it looks like he does. And so now Shrout looks like he's just considering playing a little bit of defense here, basically saying, I don't really have to make a move. I just need to not die this turn, because I don't die this turn, I win the next turn.
Yep, absolutely. Andrew's going to need to find a very fast answer to pretty much everything on Andrew's board, but particularly that Aetherling, which he does not really have an answer to, certainly in the main deck. The best answer that he has is a Celestia Charm to fog it for the turn.
Yeah, that's the best answer that Tenjum can provide. You know, he does have 2 copies of Celestia Charm again, where Edel had 3, so by losing one of those, you know, it seems like it would be a minor change, but Tenjum only does have those 2, so he's kind of only drawing to 2 cards to, as you said, fog the situation for 1 turn.
Yeah, certainly not an ideal place for Tenjum to be in.
So you see him tap 2 mana, he's sliding his creatures along, and he is going to play a Flint of Boar.
Oh, well,
and plays a Gavny Township.
That's a Magic card that's actually pretty decent and relevant in this situation. The one of in Andrew's list, being able to grow his creatures.
And he just passes the turn back. Shrout's going to Sphinx Revelation for 2, going to push himself up to 12, going to get 2 more cards, but by passing the turn back does Tenjum, and Shrout draws his Celestia Charm for the turn. I feel like Shrout's probably just going to go for it here. And you see him tapping a bunch of mana very quickly. All right, Angel Serenity has shown up. He's going to take down Restoration Angel, both of the Reckoners. So now this changes everything now.
That's definitely,
now he clears out all the problems.
Yep, takes out all 3 of the problem creatures. His now unblockable Flyers, as well as his unblockable Aetherling, are going to be able to make it into the red zone. He also has a Celestia Charm in hand, should he need to pump any of his creatures for an instant speed effect. Andrew sees the writing on the wall, and we're going to go to a second game.
So Shrout is going to be up a game here over Tenjum. Prime Speaker Bant defeats Naya Aggro in game number 1. We'll take a look at the sideboards first. Take a look at Tenjum's first, as you do have that in front of you, and he's going to be on the play for game 2.
Yep, he's got a couple of options here that I think are going to be quite good in this matchup. One of them is Blasphemous Act.
Yep.
That is a card that in that particular game would have probably cost 1 mana for most of the game.
Would have cost 1 mana, and it would have won Tenjum the game immediately.
Immediately with both of those Boros Reckoners in play.
Yes.
Another consideration is Assemble the Legion, a game, or pretty much a game changer, something that can chump block for a couple of turns, and then once it starts getting going 3 or 4 turns in, just by itself can overload the board.
Yep.
Those are the 2 big ones in the sideboard. I would also not be terribly surprised to see Boros Charm, considering the number of Planeswalkers that he saw in that game.
Sure.
It's a good answer to Planeswalkers. And it's also pretty good to be able to double strike your Restoration Angel against an opposing Restoration Angel, make your team unblockable against, you don't know what's in Andrew Shrout's deck. He could have things like Supreme Verdict. So all 3 modes relevant. He can protect against a Garruk Fight, for example. And so that one's a consideration as well.
And speaking of Supreme Verdict, Shrout does have 2 copies of those in his sideboard. Both players do have 3 copies of Unflinching Courage in their sideboard, but I'm not particularly fond of that card because both players have access to Celestia Charm as well. So I feel like a lot of things are going to have to go right for Unflinching Courage to be good for either player. So I'd be surprised to see either one sideboard that in. Garrett Primal Hunter on Shrout's side as well. If he is going to get into a stall like we saw in that game, or if he's trying to create a stall, I like the ability of Garrett to be able to break one of those. Syncopate is okay. Seems like it's much better on the play than it was on the draw. We also see the Tension Sphere, 2 copies of Clone, a Silklash Spider, and a Celestia Charm. So Shrout can actually move up to 3 Celestia Charms, where Tenjum cannot. I also do like Clone, because if you just want to have a best guy contest, it gives Shrout access to having the best guy more often than Tenjum does. And I think that Supreme Verdict is kind of unique again, and I think it's a card that Shrout's going to bring in just because it's something that can really catch Tenjum off guard. So I'm interested to see how he's going to sideboard, what he's going to move in, what he's going to move out. I don't love Garrett Relentless in the matchup. If you're Shrout, again, it did not have much of an effect on that game. It did kind of change the way that Tenjum played, but not in such a dramatic way that it's like, if I draw one of these, it's pretty much game over.
Absolutely, yeah. His other Planeswalker was much better, and I think that the other Garrett would be much better in this matchup as well. I think that the other options he has, Detention Sphere, Domery Raid can very easily take over a game, as it was threatening to do in game 1. It's possible that he wants those for Tenjum's Domery Raids. And also he has a Silklash Spider, which is one of the best answers to a Thundermaw Hellkite from a defensive perspective.
Yeah, you know, it's one of the few guys that can actually block Thundermaw Hellkite and live to tell the tale. Silklash Spider, again, because Shrout has Garrett Relentless that can flip into Garrett the Veil Curse. If he does choose to leave them in, he can tutor for them. So, you know, we'll see if he wants to bring in the Silklash Spider or not. I actually do like it against a deck that does have Restoration Angel and Thundermaw Hellkite. Also, it just has a real big butt.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
Having a real big butt actually matters quite a bit against like all of Tenjum's guys. You know, be it Reckoner, be it Flinthoof Boar, be it Smiter. The fact that this thing can block for days or make your big top deck of Thundermaw Hellkite tap all your flyers, get in, making that irrelevant is actually pretty nice as well. So, as someone who casts Thundermaw Hellkite quite a bit, I'm not really a big fan of playing with Silklash Spider.
Sure.
So we'll see if Shrout brings that in.
If you're Tenjum in this matchup, do you go whole hog, no pun intended, with the Flinthoof Boar on the aggro plan? Do you decide, all right, my best chance, I can't let him draw 15 extra cards.
Sure.
I have to be aggressive. So I have to bring in things like Unflinching Courage and use Boros Charms to go to the face, things like that? Or do you try and play the mid-game plan with Assemble the Legion? Or do you bring in both?
You know, I'm much more of a fan of just being the aggressive deck. You know, it goes back to Mike Flores' article, Who's the Beatdown? It's all about role assessment in this matchup. The longer the game goes, the more it favors Shrout, because Shrout's late game cards are simply better than Tenjum's. You know, we saw Shrout draw that game out with Prime Super Zagana. Draw 5, draw 5, draw 5. Cast the Sphinx's Revelation, even though it was only a baby one for 2. Aetherling coming into play and being able to, one, play an insanely good defense and then convert that and play awesome offense. Angel of Serenity, you know, all of these cards that, you know, Tenjum's cards are certainly powerful, but they're not as powerful as Shrout's, but Shrout needs the game to go long to be able to use those cards. So if you're Tenjum, you have to be the aggressive deck here, and
Agreed.
He's got to turn to Loxodon Smiter to really get the aggression going, and I like that a lot. He's got to be giving the beatdowns as fast as he possibly can.
Yep. And Andrew Shrout playing a tap land on turn 1, not paying any mana for either of his Ravnica Shock lands, playing an Arbor Elf on turn 2 to be able to set up his more powerful plays.
I want to see if Tenjum has a good follow-up here. It looks like he's drawn some red mana. He has in the form of Sacred Foundry. So let's see if he's going to use all of his mana this turn. Is it another Loxodon Smiter? It's a Domri. We're going to see that fight, so I actually like that quite a bit. The only thing I don't like about that is it looks like he's missed a point of damage with his Avacyn's Pilgrim, and every point adds up when you're trying to be the aggressive deck against a Thragtusk, Restoration Angel, Sphinx's Revelation deck.
Absolutely. Andrew did side in the Detention Spheres to be able to deal with Domri Raid for situations just like this, because that Domri Raid is going to start garnering Andrew card advantage. Andrew doesn't want him to have any, or Andrew Shrout doesn't want him to have any card advantage. He wants all the card advantage to himself.
Yes.
And so, your Planeswalker that draws 1 card, I don't think we're going to let that happen.
So he has the option of Detention Sphere, that or Smiter. He chooses the Detention Sphere, the Domri. So we'll see how that ends up playing out for him now. Because I think he just drew another Domri, but you also see another Smiter in Tenjum's hand. So this could get really interesting, depending on what Tenjum tries to do this turn. Because if he tries to keep getting hyper aggressive, and he's coming in for 5 and plays another Smiter, he gets absolutely ruined by the Detention Sphere. But it's Domri instead. We're going up. It's not a creature, so Domri's going to stay at 4. Top card stays on top of Tenjum's deck.
Shrout could also certainly have Supreme Verdict once again, although Tenjum did not see it in Game 1 because it's not in his in Shrout's main deck. He could see it in Game 2. I think that that's probably the correct assessment of the situation. Andrew Tenjum wants to have the extra card advantage, at least possibility on the board. He is much less comfortable in these grindy creature matchups than Andrew Shrout is. Shrout, very well known for his top 8 appearance, in which he had many creatures in his deck in the top 8 of Pro Tour Dragon's Maze. He was also in the Mox Players Championship, Magic Online Championship Series, with a deck that had over 30 creatures in it. So he is much more comfortable in the grindy, bouncing off creatures matchups.
Sure.
He does have many options here as well. He's deciding if he wants to pay 2 life this turn to be able to play one of his powerful 4 mana spells, which he chooses to do, going down to 7.
And it is going to be a verdict. Okay. And you saw Tenjum kind of pick up his cards pretty quickly, so I think he may have known that that was coming, depending on how familiar he is with Shrout's deck. Again, Shrout has won a Star City Classic with this deck, and it was the largest classic that was ever attended. So if you are familiar with Shrout and the fact that he plays Prime Speaker Band a lot, then you know that he has Supreme Verdict somewhere out throughout his 75. Additionally, if you're familiar with the deck archetype of Prime Speaker Band, you're familiar that Supreme Verdict is looming somewhere throughout that 75. But we see Tenjum just play a Smiter, plays a Cliff Top Retreat, passes the turn back. If you're Shrout, you're pretty happy about this because now you get to establish Thragtusk, you get your 5 life back, and Domri does not allow you to fight that very well.
Yeah. But Domri doesn't really want to fight right now. Domri wants to get that emblem, which is a huge problem for Shrout to deal with.
Yeah. Hey, we're getting closer, but again, remember that as Domri's going to take up to 6 and Tenjum's going to look at the top card of his deck and miss yet again, remember that Shrout does have that Detention Sphere in his hand in reserve. So, you know, if he deems Domri to be an issue, Shrout can actually just take care of it, as you're going to see Tenjum cast a Voice of Resurgence, reaching towards his mana to maybe cast another spell for this turn. But if you're Shrout, one thing that you know right now is that my opponent does not have like any other creatures in his hand.
Yes.
Because he has missed on Domri multiple times. So that means the top card of his deck is either a spell or a land, and you can deduce what those cards are, and you're going to see Tenjum play another Smiter and pass a turn back. So that's Smiter number 3 of this match.
Smiter not at its best in this matchup. It's just a big guy. Andrew Shrout has them in his deck as well, and he gets much more value off of them. In Tenjum's deck, they are pretty much just a beater. In Andrew Shrout's deck, they can have Vigilance, thanks to Restoration Angel. They can draw cards, and many other problematic permanents coming out of Andrew Shrout's deck now. 2 3-mana enchantments, being able to take out the pair of Elephant Soldiers, and an Unflinching Courage going on Thragtusk.
Yeah, now this turn's completely insane because it completely ruins Tenjum. 2 for 1 with the Detention Sphere. Now Shrout is likely attacking that Domri, so Tenjum wants to at least get 1 more activation out of it. He's got to block with his Voice of Resurgence. Shrout is going to gain life of that, going to gain 7 life.
Absolutely.
So Domri's going to move up. Again, Tenjum knew what the top card of his deck was. Now he knows the top card of his deck yet again, which is not a creature. So now Domri has gone from decent to pretty bad, and Tenjum realizes that I can't block the stupid 7/5, so might as well get the 1 point of damage in. And if you're Shrout, you couldn't be happier now.
Boy, that's quite an Unflinching Courage.
And I was interested to see if either player was going to sideboard this card in, because if you're Tenjum, you can sideboard in with the rationale, as you brought up, of I need to just be the aggressive deck as often as possible and try to kill my opponent with this. If you're Shrout, your line of thought or your thought process is that, hey, this lets me actually play defense pretty well, because I can just put this on a guy, and then my guy is huge, outclass his guys. I can turn the corner a little bit easier with this investment, and there's really no way for him to punish me outside of Selesnya Charm, so I might as well go for it.
Yeah, absolutely. The only real way Andrew Tenjum has to deal with a creature that has Unflinching Courage on it that isn't going to 2 for 1 himself because of things like Thragtusk and Voice of Resurgence is the Selesnya Charm. Mizzium Mortars doesn't really do it. Fighting with Domri Raid certainly doesn't do it. So that's going to win combat for Andrew Shrout about, I would say, 75-80% of the time. And so I think it's much better in Shrout's deck after sideboard, because it allows him to come back, just as we saw. He went down to 6. That's a dangerous place to be against a Thundermaw Hellkite deck.
Yep. And the other thing I like here is that now Shrout has identified that I don't even care about Domri anymore, because he could have finished it off last turn, but he actually let Tenjum keep it, as he said, all right, I'm going to start going, just start going to the dome, and I just want to get this game over with. Like, your Domris have not hit, so I know that the cards that you're drawing are almost like borderline irrelevant. So you can have that Domri, you keep missing with it anyway, and what's the best thing you can draw? It's like just Thunderball Hellkite now, because the rest of your guys are so average, and my Thragtusk with Unflinching Courage simply outclasses it. So he starts going to the dome and decides that I just want to get this stupid game over with, and so that's what you see him doing. Tenjum is going to play a Gavany Township, attack with the Elemental Token, and activate it. But yeah, and you see Shrout showing the Celestial Charm, and Tenjum is going to concede the game, so Andrew Shrout is going to move along to 8-1 here with Prime Speaker Ban.
With Andrew Tenjum at 9 life, the Thragtusk was a 5-3 to begin with, then received some courage in the form of an unflinching variety, went up to a 7-5, and the Celestial Charm was going to give it an additional +2/+2 for Exactsies.
So Andrew Shrout, Pro Tour Top 8 Dragon's Maze competitor, is now 8-1. You know, he does have some Open Series wins as well, so he's starting to do very well in the professional circuit. Also has plenty of success on this one. And again, you know, it's funny, you talk about, you know, players who play the same deck versus kind of switching it up. Earlier this weekend and earlier today, we saw Jeff Hooglin switching from Rug Flash to a different deck. We asked him why he did that. He just said, I'm tired of it.